If you love deep, emotional courtroom stories based on shocking family secrets, hit the subscribe button now. Turn on the bell icon because every week I bring you cases that bend the line between law and human darkness. I'm attorney Evelyn Carter, and today's case is the one I never wanted to tell, a case that didn't begin in a courtroom. It began in my own home. My name is attorney Evelyn Carter. For 26 years, I served as a federal prosecutor. I've seen killers cry, I've seen innocent men rot, I've seen families shatter in front of me like glass. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the case that emerged the day my mother took her last breath. Because for the first time, the crime wasn't in a file. It was in my blood. It started on a quiet Sunday afternoon, the kind of day the world doesn't warn you about. The sun was too calm, the air too soft, almost disrespectful to the grief hanging inside our house. My mother's funeral had just ended, and guests slowly faded out like shadows returning to their lives. My brother Daniel stood in the hallway, staring at a family picture from 1982, the four of us smiling like life had promised eternal safety. He touched the frame gently, and I noticed something I had never seen on his face before: fear. Real fear. The estate lawyer, Mr. Albright, came to the house that evening. He was in his 70s, with silver hair and the kind of posture that told you he'd been reading wills longer than most people had been alive. He spread the documents on the dining table, the same table where Mom used to make us do homework. Every corner of the house felt haunted by her absence. He explained everything calmly: the property division, the savings, the insurance. It all felt mechanical, predictable, until he reached into his leather briefcase and took out a small, white envelope. He slid it toward me. "Your mother left this for you specifically," he said. "She instructed that you open it when you are ready." Ready? I wasn't ready for anything. My mother had been the anchor of our family, the quiet force that held us together even when Daniel and I drifted in opposite directions. She was warm, composed, the kind of woman who loved too deeply and forgave too easily. So why would she leave me a separate letter? Daniel looked at it, then at me, his eyes suspiciously wide. "What is it?" he whispered. "I don't know," I replied, my voice thinner than I expected. I held the envelope. The handwriting on the front wasn't her usual neat cursive. It was shakier, heavier, like someone pressing down too hard with trembling hands. Something inside me knew instantly, this wasn't a goodbye letter. This was a confession. With a deep breath, I slid my thumb under the flap and opened it. There was only one line inside, one line that tore a hole straight through my chest. "The truth about 1984 is in the attic. Forgive me." 1984, the year everything went wrong in our family. The year our Uncle John disappeared without a trace. The year police reports claimed an accident. The year my mother refused to ever discuss again. I felt every drop of blood drain from my face. Daniel stepped forward, reading the line with me. His expression changed instantly, not shock, not confusion, but something else. A tightening around his jaw, a subtle tremble in his fingers, emotion he was fighting to hide. Why would she do this?" he stammered. "I don't know," I said, though something in his eyes made me doubt my own words. In that moment, the house no longer felt like ours. Every wall vibrated with secrets. Every shadow seemed to watch. The hallway felt longer, the silence thicker, as if the truth had been waiting decades for this moment. I walked toward the attic door slowly, each step echoing louder than the last. I felt the weight of my mother's final message pressing against my heart. I felt Daniel's gaze burning into my back, nervous, hesitant, maybe guilty. The old pull-down attic ladder creaked angrily as I lowered it. A faint smell of dust and time drifted down. I hesitated, not because I feared what was up there, but because a part of me already knew. Whatever I found in that attic, my family would never be the same again. As I climbed the steps, the wooden boards groaned under me like they were whispering warnings. My flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing old furniture, boxes, holiday decorations, artifacts of a life we outgrew but never threw away. Then something caught my eye. Behind a torn piece of insulation hidden deliberately was a wooden box. Old, heavy, nailed shut, my breath caught in my throat. Why nail shut a box? Why hide it behind insulation? Why leave a letter pointing to it only after death? I knelt down, feeling the age of the wood beneath my palms. Dust coated my knees as I wedged a metal tool under the lid and pried it open. Each nail screamed as it came loose, like resisting the resurrection of a buried truth. When the lid finally gave way, my entire world changed. Inside the box lay 3 items: a blood-stained wristwatch, a stack of old photographs, and a cassette tape labeled 4 Evelyn, do not destroy. I raised the watch to the flashlight beam and ice shot down my spine. It was Uncle John's, the exact same watch he wore the night he vanished. I sat on the cold attic floor, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The air felt too still, the darkness too intimate. I knew what I had to do, but my hands trembled as I reached for an old tape recorder we kept upstairs. When I clicked the button, my mother's voice filled the attic, weak, trembling, full of a guilt she carried alone for 41 years. "Evelyn, if you're hearing this, I am already gone." The flashlight flickered. My heartbeat stuttered. The truth was coming. And I wasn't ready. The attic air felt colder as my mother's voice faded from the cassette. Not the kind of cold that comes from winter air slipping through cracks. This was deeper, heavier, the kind of cold that comes from truth finally waking up after decades of sleep. I sat there on the wooden floor, flashlight shaking in my hand, as the last click of the tape echoed through the dark attic. Dust drifted in the beam of light like frozen memories floating around me, refusing to settle. The box sat open in front of me, a coffin of secrets. Inside, a blood-stained wristwatch, old photographs, a cassette tape that had already changed everything, and beneath them, a folded piece of yellowed cloth I hadn't noticed before. I reached for the wristwatch first. Even after 41 years, the stains on the leather strap were unmistakably blood. The metal was scratched, dented in places. Uncle John was never gentle with his things, but these marks weren't from carelessness. This was impact, this was violence. I flipped the watch over and felt a jolt in my chest. His initials were still engraved on the back, JRC John Robert Carter. The same man the police told us probably ran away, probably got drunk, probably wandered into the woods. The same man whose disappearance became a whispered tragedy in our family. But this watch was proof he never walked out of that house alive. My fingers tightened around it. For a moment I felt like a child again, peeking from the staircase, hearing muffled arguments downstairs, seeing things I didn't understand. The attic creaked beneath me, as if the house itself was reacting to the truth finally resurfacing. I reached for the photographs next. They weren't in order, but the story they told didn't need order. It was loud even in fragments. Photo 1, a family gathering. My mother smiling too widely, Uncle John staring at the camera with the hollow look of a man who hadn't slept in days. Photo 4, our living room, the fireplace behind them. My mother holding Daniel's shoulders, her face tight with fear. Photo 8, the backyard at night, a shovel, half buried in soil, the ground uneven, disturbed. The photo was taken from inside the house through the window. Someone documented this intentionally. Photo 11, the attic door, closed, a dark smear near the hinge. Was that a shadow or blood? Every picture felt like a confession without words, a puzzle someone expected me to solve long after they were gone. Then I found something even more unsettling, a picture of Daniel, age 15, standing near the fireplace, his hands clenched into fists, eyes red like he had been crying hard, or had just witnessed something horrific. Why were these photos hidden? Why did my mother keep them instead of destroying them? Was she preserving guilt or protecting the truth? My heart hammered as I lifted the yellowed cloth from the bottom of the box. It was stiff, brittle, stained in patches. As I unfolded it, the smell hit me, old iron, blood. The fabric was from a shirt, a man's shirt, a torn piece of the collar with the brand tag still attached, a brand Uncle John wore. A brand he was wearing the night he vanished. My breath trembled out of me. I pressed play on the cassette again, needing answers. My mother's voice returned, weaker, shaking under the weight of memory. Evelyn, your uncle didn't disappear. It wasn't random, it wasn't fate, it was us, it was this family. My throat tightened painfully. She continued, I should have told the truth, but that night changed everything. John was drunk, furious, he grabbed Daniel. I tried to pull him away. He slipped. He hit his head on the corner of the fireplace. The fireplace, the one in the photographs. I pictured Daniel, a terrified teenage boy, watching a man collapse in front of him, blood pooling on the carpet, his mother screaming. But the tape didn't stop there. My mother whispered, voice breaking. I checked for a pulse. He was still alive, but when he came to, he wasn't the same. He attacked again. Daniel tried to protect me. He pushed him again. The second fall, that was the one that killed him. A cold shock ran through my entire body. Daniel, my gentle, quiet brother, killed our uncle? No, not murder, not malice, but defense. A child defending his life and his mother. Yet my mother didn't call the police. She didn't call anyone. She covered it up. The tape crackled. The next words were barely a whisper. I buried the body in the yard. Your brother was in shock. He didn't speak for 3 days. I told the police he walked out because I couldn't lose both my brother and my son. My jaw locked. Shock pulsed through me like electricity. A burial in our yard, at the house we grew up in. The house we slept peacefully in while a man's body lay beneath our feet. I squeezed my eyes shut, overwhelmed. My mother's final confession came like a knife. I thought I was protecting you both, but all I did was chain Daniel to a life he never escaped. I'm sorry, Evelyn, I'm so sorry. The tape clicked off. Silence swallowed me whole. I looked toward the attic ladder. The dim light from downstairs painted the doorway in soft gold, but for the first time in my life, that light felt threatening. Because the moment I climbed down, this wouldn't just be a secret, it would be a choice. My mother passed the truth to me, and now I had to decide what to do with it. My hands trembled as I gathered the items, the watch, the photos, the cloth. The tape, pieces of a buried crime. I climbed down slowly, every step feeling heavier than the last. When I reached the bottom, Daniel was there. He wasn't crying. He wasn't pretending. He looked destroyed. His eyes held a lifetime of fear and guilt. He swallowed hard. Eve, he whispered, voice shaking. I didn't reply. I couldn't. The truth was still settling inside me like ashes. He stepped closer. You know everything now, don't you? His voice cracked. And as I looked into his eyes, I realized the attic didn't just reveal a secret. It opened a door we could never close again. Daniel stood at the bottom of the attic ladder like a man waiting for a verdict. His shoulders were hunched forward, arms limp at his sides, eyes shimmering with something I had only seen once in my life, the look of a person who had lived inside the same nightmare for decades. The air between us was thick, heavy with the weight of everything I had just heard upstairs. The silence was so dense it pressed on my ears. For a moment I wondered if this was what my mother felt for 41 years, the constant pressure of truth sitting on her chest. He swallowed hard and the sound was sharp in the quiet hallway. "Eve, please say something," he whispered. I opened my mouth but the words refused to come. My throat felt tight, like this revelation had wrapped itself around my vocal cords. What was I supposed to say? I know you killed him. I know she covered it up. I know our childhood was built on a grave. My heart was still hammering from the tape. I needed air, space. The hallway felt too small to hold the truth between us. Instead of answering, I walked past him and into the kitchen. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the counter to steady myself. The overhead light buzzed faintly. The refrigerator hummed. Everything felt normal, but nothing was. Daniel followed me quietly, stopping at the doorway like he was afraid to step any closer. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this," he murmured. My jaw clenched. I stared at the counter, not trusting myself to look at him. "How was I supposed to find out?" I said finally, my voice low, tight. "On your deathbed, in another letter." "Never." He shut his eyes like the words cut through him. "I didn't want you to find out at all," he said. "You're the only one who had a life outside this house. Mom and I, we lived with it every day." That sentence hit me hard. Because it was true. I left home at 18 and never came back except for holidays. I went to law school, became a prosecutor, built a world for myself. Daniel stayed. He stayed with my mother. He stayed in this house. He stayed in this truth. And suddenly I saw all the pieces differently. The nights he couldn't sleep, the tension he carried in his shoulders, the way he flinched when someone raised their voice, the way he avoided certain rooms in the house. He wasn't just odd or sensitive like we teased him, he was haunted. I turned to him slowly. "You lived with this alone," I whispered. He shook his head fiercely, tears spilling down his cheeks. "No, Mom lived it with me. She protected me." His voice cracked. "She lost her brother because of me, Eve. She lied for me. She buried him for me. Everything she did wrong was because she loved me." His knees buckled a little and he grabbed the doorframe to steady himself. "I killed him," he choked. "I killed Uncle John." The words fell like a stone between us. I stepped toward him, my pulse thudding. "Daniel," I said softly, "you were 15. It wasn't murder. He was attacking you, attacking Mom. You were defending yourself." He shook his head violently. "It doesn't matter. The second fall, that was me. And if I hadn't, he couldn't continue." I took a slow breath and placed the tape recorder, the watch, and the photos on the table. Seeing them all together, physical proof of a truth buried in our yard, made the room feel colder. Daniel stared at the objects like they were weapons. "There's more," he whispered. My stomach tightened. "What do you mean more?" I asked. He looked away, jaw trembling, voice unsteady. "I remember the sound," he said. "The sound he made when he hit the floor the second time. I hear it every night. It never stops." I felt a sharp pain behind my ribs. He continued, barely above a whisper. "And the look on Mom's face after, she didn't cry, she didn't scream. She just looked at me like she had already decided what she was going to do. She didn't hesitate." He squeezed his eyes shut. "She told me to help her, to grab blankets, to wash the floor, to pack his things. I didn't understand what was happening. I thought she was calling the police. I thought adults knew what to do." I felt tears sting my eyes. He looked at me, then really looked at me, and it broke something in me. "I didn't know I was helping her hide a body," he whispered. "I thought I was helping her clean up after he fell. She didn't tell me until it was done." His voice cracked. "Until he was gone." My breath caught. Memories flickered, my mother's calmness when the police came, her steady voice, her unwavering story about how John had been depressed, how he walked out angry, how she told him to sleep it off. Everything so perfect, everything so controlled, everything rehearsed. Daniel pressed a hand to his chest, breathing unevenly. "She made me go upstairs," he said. "She told me to stay in my room, but I heard the back door open. I heard her dragging something across the kitchen floor. I heard the earth being moved." He covered his face with both hands, sobbing quietly. "And I did nothing, Eve, I did nothing. I just sat there because I was a coward. And she paid the price for both of us." I couldn't hold myself still anymore. I stepped forward and wrapped my arms around him. He collapsed into me, shaking with the force of decades of repressed guilt. We stood there for minutes, maybe hours, until his breathing steadied. When he pulled back, his eyes met mine with terrifying honesty. "You can't protect me," he whispered. "Not this time." I felt a jolt in my chest. "Daniel," I said gently, "you think I'm here to protect you, but I'm here because the truth deserves a voice. Mom kept this secret because she thought it would destroy you. But keeping it destroyed her." He looked down, tears dripping onto the floor. "I can't live like this anymore," he said. "I haven't lived in years." Silence settled between us like a heavy curtain. Then slowly he lifted his eyes and asked the question I had been avoiding since the moment I opened that envelope. "What are you going to do, Eve?" My breath caught, because I didn't know. I was a lawyer. I was his sister. I was the daughter of the woman who buried a body to save her child, and I was a woman raised under the roof of a lie. The answer wasn't simple, but as I looked at Daniel, broken, exhausted, unmasked, I realized something. Whatever choice I made would define the rest of our lives. I didn't answer Daniel's question right away. When he asked, "What are you going to do, Eve?" it felt less like a question and more like a final test. The kind of test life gives you once, and whatever answer you choose, something is going to break. I picked up the cassette from the table and turned it over slowly in my hand. It was such a small object for something that carried the weight of a buried life. The silence in the kitchen wrapped around us, thick and buzzing. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. The refrigerator hummed. Somewhere outside, a car door closed, a dog barked. The world had the audacity to keep going. "I don't know yet," I said finally. It was the only honest answer I had. Daniel let out a small, bitter laugh. "You're the one who always knows," he said. "You walk into a courtroom and you know what to do. You walk into people's lives, sort through their worst mistakes, and you know who's guilty, who's lying, who deserves a second chance." He shook his head. "But when it's your own family, suddenly nothing's black or white, right?" His words hit a nerve because he wasn't wrong. In court, I could separate myself. I had rules, precedents, evidence, procedures. The law was a structure I could stand inside, a shield made of statutes and case history. But standing in my mother's kitchen, there was no shield. There was no professional distance. There was just my brother and the truth we were drowning in. I took a slow breath. "Sit down," I said. He hesitated, then pulled out a chair and lowered himself into it like his legs were barely holding him. I sat across from him, the cassette tape between us like a third person at the table. "I'm going to ask you something," I said, "and I need you to tell me the truth, all of it, no protecting mom, no protecting yourself, no leaving pieces out because you think you're sparing me. I need everything." He nodded, eyes red, hands clasped tightly together. "Daniel," I said quietly, "did you intend to kill Uncle John?" His eyes widened, and for a moment I saw the 15-year-old boy behind the grown man sitting in front of me. His chin trembled. "No," he whispered. "I swear to you, Eve, I never wanted him dead." "Then tell me exactly what happened, every detail you remember." He exhaled shakily. "It was late," he began. "You were upstairs. I'd just finished my homework. Mom was in the kitchen doing dishes. Uncle John came in drunk. Again, I could smell it before I saw him. He'd been drinking harder those last few months. You remember that, right?" "Yes," I said. "He was different near the end." Daniel nodded. "He started yelling at Mom about money, about how he helped Dad when he was alive and how she owed him. Mom tried to calm him down, told him you and I were home, told him to lower his voice. He didn't care, he got louder, meaner. I stepped in and told him to stop talking to her like that. He looked down at his hands. He didn't like that." I could picture it. A tall, intoxicated man with a bruised ego, staring down at a teenage boy daring to stand between him and his rage. "He got in my face," Daniel continued. "He called me useless, said I was soft. Said Dad would be disappointed in me. He shoved me into the wall, hard. Mom tried to pull him away, but he grabbed her wrist. That's when I snapped." His voice shook. "I pushed him, I didn't even think. I just wanted him away from her." He swallowed. He stumbled. "I didn't think I'd pushed him that hard," but he fell back and hit the edge of the fireplace. I still remember the sound, like someone dropping a melon. "I've heard a lot of awful sounds in my life, but that one," he shivered. "It never leaves." Tears blurred his vision, but he kept going. He was out cold, there was blood. Mom screamed his name. She was shaking him, begging him to wake up. I kept saying, "I didn't mean to, I didn't mean to." I thought he was dead, but then he groaned. He tried to sit up. Daniel's face went pale, and when he saw the blood, he went wild. I leaned forward slightly. "What do you mean wild?" "He went after Mom," Daniel said. "Not me, her, said she turned me against him, said she ruined everything." He grabbed her shoulders. "I thought he was going to," he trailed off, voice breaking. "I thought he was going to kill her." His fingers dug into his own palms as he relived it. "I didn't think," he repeated, voice barely more than a breath. "I just reacted. I grabbed him from behind and pulled him off her." He twisted, I lost my balance, and we both fell. He hit the floor. This time he didn't move at all. Silence. I could almost see it playing out in front of me, the chaos, the shouting, the anger, the fear, the unplanned, desperate movements of people trying to survive a moment spinning out of control. "How long was it before Mom decided to hide him?" I asked softly. Daniel shut his eyes. "Not long," he said. "She checked for a pulse, she checked his breathing, there was nothing. She just stared at him for a long time. I kept asking if we should call an ambulance, call the police, tell someone." She just kept staring." He swallowed. "And then something changed in her eyes. It was like she hardened, like a door shut inside her." I felt a chill. "She looked at me," he said, voice cracking, "and said, 'You didn't mean to, you were protecting me, I'm your mother, I'm not losing you too.'" And just like that, it was decided, without asking me, without discussion. She decided the story for both of us. "What did she make you do?" I asked. He swallowed again, his voice quieter. "She told me to go to your room," he said, "to wake you up but not to let you come downstairs. To tell you something broke in the kitchen and she had to clean it, to keep you distracted, to keep you away." As he spoke, something flickered in my own memory, a faint, distant image. A night when Mom came into my room, late, face flushed, telling me to stay in bed, that everything was fine, that something fell and broke in the kitchen, but to go back to sleep. I'd been groggy, confused. I remembered the sound of the vacuum cleaner downstairs, the smell of bleach, but I was a kid. I thought she was just cleaning late. I never connected that night to the day they told us Uncle John was missing. I went upstairs, Daniel continued. I sat on your bed, you kept asking what happened. I kept lying. I could hear her moving things downstairs, dragging something. Then later I heard the back door open, the sound of the screen door. The scrape of something heavy across the patio, the muffled thud of a shovel breaking ground. His voice faded. I didn't help her bury him, Eve. She did that alone. She never let me see where. That detail hit me like a punch. She didn't let him see where. She carried that part alone. I looked at the items on the table again, the watch, the photographs, the cloth, the tape. The photos of the yard at night, the shovel, the disturbed ground. Mom had documented it in some way, not perfection, but enough to make sure it never truly disappeared, even if she tried to hide it. Why didn't you ever tell me? I asked quietly. Not once. Not in all these years. Daniel's eyes filled again. Because I knew who you were becoming, he said. Even back then, you were already you, the girl who knew every rule, the one who corrected teachers when they misquoted a case. The one who believed in right and wrong like they were carved into stone. I knew if I told you, you'd do what you're thinking about doing now. Report it, expose it, dig him up. Destroy whatever was left of our family in the name of justice. You think I don't feel sick every time I look at you in that suit? He whispered, knowing what I did, knowing what Mom did. Watching you put criminals away for less than what we did. His voice broke completely then. I felt like a fraud every time I saw you on TV, he confessed. Every time I watched you speak about the law, about no one being above it. Because I knew in our house, the law stopped at the back door. His words were a blade, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. I took a slow breath, forcing my mind to steady itself. That part of me that knew how to separate emotion from fact slowly rose to the surface. The part of me that had built a career out of sorting pain into evidence and guilt into categories. Daniel, I said gently, I need to know something else. He nodded, though his eyes were tired. Did Mom ever ask you to lie out loud to the police, to anyone? He thought for a moment. Yes, he said, once the day the officers came. They asked me when I last saw Uncle John. She squeezed my shoulder under the table hard. I knew what she wanted, so I lied. I said I saw him leave the house, that he was drinking, that he said he needed air. He looked up at me. That's when it stopped being just an accident I was part of, he whispered. That's when I became part of the cover-up. I nodded slowly. He wasn't wrong. There was a legal difference between an accidental death and an intentional concealment of a body. Between a panic reaction and a premeditated lie to law enforcement. Between fear and obstruction of justice. I knew all of this. I'd built cases on less, but this wasn't a stranger. This was my brother. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling for a moment. The plaster above me was cracked in one place. I traced the lines with my eyes, thinking about how many years our lives had been cracked without us noticing it. What if I told you, I said slowly, that once I do what I'm supposed to do, your life is going to change forever? He gave a humorless, tired smile. My life changed the night he hit the floor, he said. This, whatever you're thinking about doing, this might be the first honest day I've had since then. His words stunned me with their quiet truth. I lowered my gaze to his. You understand, I said, my voice low, that if I take this to the authorities, there may be an investigation. They might dig up the yard, they might charge you, even after all these years. He nodded. I know, he whispered. You could go to prison, Daniel. He inhaled slowly, eyes glistening but steady now. I've been in prison my whole life, he said softly. Bars or no bars. Something inside me shifted. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about what the law demanded. This was about what the truth had already done to him. To Mom, to us, keeping it buried hadn't saved anyone. It had just turned our family home into a mausoleum built on denial. I picked up the cassette again and closed my fingers around it. The plastic dug into my palm. You're leaving this in my hands, I said. Yes, he replied. And you'll accept whatever comes? He hesitated just a second and then nodded again. Yes, I believed him. I stood up slowly, feeling the full gravity of what I was about to do or not do. Then I need to think, I said. I need to look at this not as your sister, but as an attorney. I owe you that honesty. And I owe Mom that too. He nodded, though I could see the fear flash across his face. I walked away from the table, away from him, down the hallway toward my old bedroom, the same room where I slept peacefully the night my uncle died under this roof. As I closed the door behind me, my hands shook. For the first time in my life, I understood something with painful clarity. The law is easy when it belongs to other people's families. It's when it walks into your kitchen that it becomes a living, breathing thing you have to look in the eye. And I hadn't even made my decision yet, but whatever I chose next, there would be no going back. I closed my bedroom door and leaned against it, letting the silence swallow me whole. The house was too still, too heavy with a truth that had lived inside its walls far longer than any of us realized. I felt like I was standing at the edge of two lives, the one I had lived up until today, and the one that would begin the moment I made my choice. I walked slowly across the room and sat on the bed, the same bed I slept in when I was a teenager, back when I believed adults always did the right thing, back when I believed my mother could never lie to me, back when I believed Daniel was fragile but harmless, back when I believed our home was safe. That version of me died the moment I opened the attic box. I set the evidence on the comforter: the wristwatch, the torn cloth, the photographs, the cassette tape, 4 items, 4 knives aimed at the past. I picked up the photographs first and spread them out like a deck of memories laid bare. The edges curled slightly, some corners torn, but each one pulsed with a terrible clarity. The living room, the fireplace, the backyard, the shovel. The attic door, Mom and Daniel with haunted eyes. Snapshots of a crime that had been silently screaming for 41 years. I traced the outline of Daniel's face in one of the photos, the one taken in the living room. His eyes were red. His posture tense, his fists clenched, he looked like a boy on the verge of breaking. How did no one see this? I whispered to myself, but then I remembered I never looked. I was 14 and focused on school, debate club, college dreams. I lived in my books, I lived in the future. Daniel lived in the house. Daniel lived in the aftermath. Daniel lived in the truth. I picked up the wristwatch next. The metal was cold, unnervingly heavy for its size. I stared at the tiny dried flakes lodged in the grooves of the strap, blood that had turned brown, almost black with age. This wasn't just evidence. It was time frozen at the exact moment everything went wrong. I turned it over in my hands again and again until the numbers on the clock blurred. What was the right thing now? What did justice look like when the criminal was a child who grew into a man broken by guilt? What did justice look like when the victim was violent, unpredictable, dangerous even in his final moments? What did justice look like when the woman who covered it up was the very person who raised me? I set the watch down and picked up the cassette, the last voice of the woman who hid more truth than I knew how to carry. My mother. The woman who taught me right from wrong. The woman who buried a body to protect her child. I pressed play again, not because I wanted more answers, but because I needed to hear her voice. I needed to understand the woman behind the decision that had twisted our lives into knots. Her wavering voice filled the room. You were always the strong one, Evelyn. I knew someday you would find the truth and know what to do with it. Daniel, he was never the same. I ruined him with my choices. I ruined myself. Her voice broke. I closed my eyes as she continued. I didn't do it because I wanted to. I did it because I thought I had no other choice. I was alone. Your father was gone. I had 2 children looking at me. I made a choice that protected one and destroyed the rest. My throat tightened. And I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I took a shaky breath and stopped the tape. Hearing her voice didn't make the decision easier. It only made it heavier. My mother wasn't a monster. She wasn't evil. She wasn't manipulative or calculating. She was scared. And fear makes criminals out of people who never meant to become one. I pressed my palms into my eyes. I needed air. I needed clarity. I stood up and walked to the window, pushing aside the curtains. The backyard stretched out before me, the grass trimmed, the garden beds neat, the old tree at the far end swaying gently in the breeze. Somewhere out there was a grave I had walked over 100 times without knowing. I rested my forehead against the window glass. The coolness calmed me slightly, but the questions kept coming, louder and louder. If I reported this, would they exhume the body? Yes, they would. Would there be a full investigation? Absolutely. Would Daniel be charged? Almost certainly. Obstruction, improper burial, maybe more depending on details. Would I lose him? Probably. If I didn't report it, I would become part of the lie, part of the cover-up, part of the crime. And the moment I knew the truth, the law applied to me too. My pulse quickened. My lungs felt tight. I walked back to the bed and stared at the items again. What am I supposed to do? I whispered to the empty room. But the room had no opinion. The walls had no advice. The house had spent decades suffocating the truth. It wasn't going to help me now. I heard a soft knock. Eve, Daniel's voice carried through the door, thick and trembling. Can I come in? I wiped my face, though I didn't remember crying. Come in, I said. He opened the door slowly and stepped inside like he expected the floor to collapse beneath him. His eyes were swollen, his hair disheveled. He looked like he hadn't slept in years. He saw the photos spread across the bed. The watch, the tape, he swallowed. Are you going to turn me in? He asked. He didn't ask angrily, he didn't ask fearfully. He asked like a man who had accepted his fate long before I ever walked into the attic. I motioned for him to sit. He lowered himself onto the edge of the bed, staring at his hands. I wasn't brave, he said quietly. Not that night. Not after. I didn't come forward. I didn't confess. I let Mom carry everything. I let you live in the dark. He looked at me with eyes full of remorse. I don't deserve your protection. Daniel, no, he interrupted softly. Let me finish. He wiped his face with the sleeve of his shirt. I've replayed that night every day for 41 years. Some days I'm sure I killed him. Other days I'm sure he would have killed Mom if I hadn't stepped in. Some days I wish I could erase the whole thing. Other days I wish I had died instead of him. A painful silence filled the room. I want to be free, he whispered. Free of this secret, free of the fear, free of the nightmares. If that means prison, if that means losing everything, then maybe that's still better than what I've been living with. I felt something shift, a slow, heavy realization. Daniel wasn't asking me to save him. Daniel wasn't asking me to protect him. He was asking me to let the truth breathe, even if it destroyed him. I took his hands in mine, squeezing tightly. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, I said quietly. But I promise you something, whatever happens next, it won't come from anger or punishment or blame, it will come from the truth, from what Mom wanted. He nodded, tears spilling again. I trust you, he whispered. I always have. His words hit me harder than I expected. I watched him stand, his movements slow and weary like the weight of the past sat on his shoulders. He walked to the door, paused, and looked back. Whatever you choose, he said softly, I'll accept it. Then he left the room. The door clicked shut behind him. I sat there staring at the cassette tape, and for the first time I realized. The hardest part wasn't deciding whether to turn Daniel in. The hardest part was accepting that whatever choice I made, justice and love could not exist in the same place. One of them would break. I just had to decide which. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a second. I lay in my old childhood bed, staring at the ceiling as shadows stretched and shrank across the plaster. The house made its usual noises, pipes settling, wood creaking, wind pressing against the windows, but everything sounded different now. Every noise made me wonder if it was the house shifting, or the truth pushing its way upward from the ground. Around 4 a.m. I sat up, swung my legs over the edge of the bed, and pressed my palms into my eyes. My mind felt like it was being pulled in two directions, the attorney in me screaming one thing, the sister in me begging another. Law or blood, truth or protection, justice or survival, there was no winning. By sunrise, I had made my decision, not because it felt right, not because it felt good, but because it felt inevitable. I gathered the photos, the watch, the cloth, and the cassette tape, placing them all into a single folder. My hands shook as I slid it shut. The moment I zipped the folder, it felt like I sealed the fate of my entire family. I walked downstairs. Daniel was sitting at the kitchen table, staring into a mug of cold coffee, his fingers trembling around the cup. His eyes looked bruised from crying, but when he saw the folder in my hand, something inside him stilled. You're going, he whispered. I have to. He nodded slowly, like a man accepting a sentence he had already served long before Judgment Day arrived. I'll be here, he said. Whatever happens, I'll be here. His voice cracked, but he didn't cry, he just looked tired. Old in a way I had never seen him before. I walked out the door and into the morning that felt colder than any winter I'd lived through. I sat in my car for a moment, resting my forehead against the steering wheel. I could still hear my mother's voice from the tape. I'm passing this truth to you. I turned the key in the ignition and drove straight to the police station. I had walked into police stations thousands of times in my career, confident, authoritative, often carrying high-profile files under my arm. But today, everything felt wrong. The walls looked too tall, the fluorescent lights too harsh, the officers' voices too loud. It felt like I was stepping into a place where I no longer belonged. Detective Raymond was at his desk when I approached, same detective I had worked with during a federal case years ago. His eyes lit up when he saw me. Evelyn Carter, he said warmly. Haven't seen you in a while, retirement treating you well? Not exactly, I said softly. I need to report something. His smile faded. He gestured for me to follow him to a private interview room. Inside, he shut the door. What's going on? He asked. I set the folder on the table. This is evidence, I said quietly. From an unresolved case, he frowned. What case? 1984, I whispered. The disappearance of my uncle. He blinked, confusion flickering into something darker. I thought that was closed. It shouldn't have been. He opened the folder and began examining the photographs first. His brow furrowed, then he saw the blood-stained wristwatch. He looked up at me sharply. Where did you get this? In my mother's attic, I said. She passed away recently. She left me a letter and a cassette. A cassette, he repeated. Yes, I said, her confession. He exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. You understand, he said carefully, if what you're giving me is legitimate evidence of a crime, I'm required to reopen the case. I know, and I'm required to question your brother. I know, and if necessary, arrest him. My voice didn't falter. I know, he stared at me for a long moment. You're doing the right thing, he said gently. I didn't feel the warmth of those words. There was no comfort in them, no pride, only a coldness deeper than winter. He slid the tape into an old player they kept for archived materials. The moment my mother's voice filled the room, Detective Raymond's expression shifted from professional to horrified. By the end of the tape, the room felt like a confession box, a grave, a courtroom, a battlefield. Raymond pressed stop and sat very still. Evelyn, he said slowly, this is serious. I know, we will need to exhume the yard. I know, we will need to bring your brother in. My breath caught, but I held steady. I know, I said again. He picked up his radio and issued a call I had heard hundreds of times in my career, but never thought I'd hear in a way that touched my own family. I need a team to 1128 Pinemore Drive. Begin preservation and excavation procedures. My address, my backyard, my home. He turned to me. You should call your brother, he said quietly. I didn't need to. A part of me knew he already felt it, the shift in fate, the tremor in the air, the silence before the storm. The dig. By the time I drove home, officers were already everywhere, uniforms in the yard, detectives taking notes, forensic vans parked at the curb, yellow tape marking the boundaries. The house looked like a crime scene, because it was. Neighbors peeked from windows. A news van pulled up before I could even get out of my car. The sound of shovels cutting into the ground felt like claws scraping against my bones. Daniel stood on the porch, arms wrapped around himself, face pale. When he saw me, he didn't look angry or betrayed. He just looked relieved. Like this was the moment he had been running from, and finally, he stopped running. I walked up to him. "We can still say you didn't know," I whispered. "We can still—" "No," he interrupted softly. "I won't lie anymore." He stepped off the porch and approached the officers with his hands visible, palms open, like a man surrendering not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. Detective Raymond approached him. "Daniel Carter?" he asked. "Yes," Daniel said. "I need you to come with me for questioning." He nodded, barely breathing. "Okay." As they escorted him to the car, something in me twisted violently. I felt like I was watching him walk into a darkness I had helped create. They put him in the back of the cruiser, not in handcuffs yet, but the implication was clear. The door closed with a dull, final thud. And that sound was the loudest thing I had ever heard in my life. Hours passed, officers dug, forensics analyzed soil, photographers documented every inch. Around sunset, a detective approached me, his face grim. "We found remains," he said, "exactly where the photo suggested." My breath stilled. "Human remains," he added softly. I nodded once. It felt like my heart sank into my stomach. They uncovered the watch's matching engraving on a rusted metal belt buckle. They found bone fragments, old fabric, the remnants of a wallet. The crime wasn't a secret anymore. It was a fact. A documented, photographed, undeniable fact. And facts don't go away. Near midnight, the detective returned to my porch. "We've completed preliminary analysis," he said. "We have enough probable cause." I looked at him with hollow eyes. "Probable cause for what?" He hesitated. "For Daniel's arrest, on charges of obstruction of justice, concealment of a body, and giving false statements to police." The world tilted. My throat tightened. I felt my pulse in my ears. I wanted to collapse, but I didn't, because this was the choice I made. This was the truth I chose to free. "Can I see him?" I whispered. The detective nodded. "He's been asking for you." I walked to the car where they held him. Daniel sat inside, hands resting on his knees, face calmer than I expected. When he saw me, he smiled softly. "It's okay," he said. "Really?" "It's okay." Tears filled my eyes. "It's not," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." "You freed me," he said gently. "You think you destroyed me, but you didn't. I've been drowning since I was 15. This feels like the first breath of air I've taken in years." I pressed my hand against the glass. He pressed his against mine. "I love you, Eve," he said quietly. "No matter what happens next." My voice cracked. "I love you too." Then the officers opened the door, read him his rights, and took him away. The red and blue lights reflected off the windows, washing over the house in pulses of color. And I stood there alone, watching the car disappear down the street, carrying my brother toward a future he did not deserve, but a truth he could no longer run from. The courthouse had always been a familiar place to me, a place where I walked with confident strides and a sharp mind, a place where justice felt like a blade I knew how to wield. But on the morning of Daniel's arraignment, those same steps felt like walking into a cathedral of judgment with no armor and no prayers left to whisper. I stood in the hallway outside courtroom 2B, my palms cold, my heartbeat slow and painful. People passed by, attorneys carrying thick files, officers murmuring into radios, families clutching tissues or hope. But I felt disconnected from all of them, like I was watching my life through glass. Daniel was brought through the side entrance, escorted by 2 deputies. He wasn't handcuffed, but he might as well have been. The weight of 41 years sat on his shoulders. When he saw me, he offered a soft, almost apologetic smile. Not for himself, but for what he knew this was doing to me. His eyes said everything he didn't have the strength to say aloud. "It's okay, you did the right thing." The courtroom doors opened with a low creak that felt louder than it should have. We stepped inside. I've stepped into hundreds of courtrooms, but this one felt different from the moment I crossed the threshold. The air was dense, charged, as if the walls themselves could feel the weight of what was about to happen. A few reporters sat in the back row, notebooks open, cameras ready. The murmurs among them faded the moment Daniel walked in. He sat at the defendant's table, his hands folded tightly in front of him. His attorney, a man named Bauer who specialized in cold case appeals, leaned in to whisper something. Daniel nodded, but the movement was slow, mechanical. When the judge entered, the entire room stood. My heart lodged somewhere between my ribs. The judge looked at Daniel with a mixture of curiosity and gravity. This wasn't a typical case. This was decades-old guilt brushing a second life across the surface of the law. "State versus Daniel Carter," the clerk announced. Hearing my brother's name spoken in that tone, that official tone, it was like being punched in the stomach. The prosecutor, a young, sharp-eyed attorney named Julia Stone, stood. Your Honor, the state moves forward with the following charges: obstruction of justice, intentional concealment of human remains, and providing false testimony in the course of an investigation. I closed my eyes. Each charge was a rung on a ladder Daniel never climbed by choice. Each one a step he was forced into by fear, by trauma, by a mother trying to protect her child the only way she knew how. His attorney responded calmly, "We enter a plea of not guilty." Despite everything, those 3 words didn't surprise me. Not guilty didn't mean innocent. It meant, this is not the full truth and we will prove it. The judge nodded. We will proceed to preliminary hearings within 2 weeks. A heavy silence settled. Then the judge added, given the nature of this case and the defendant's clean record, the court grants bail. I felt my shoulders collapse with relief I didn't know I was holding. But nothing was over, nothing was even close to over. Over the following days, the forensic team worked tirelessly. Soil samples, remains, old items, and even the fibers from the torn cloth were examined under the highest level analysis. I attended every meeting I legally could. I stayed just outside every door where Daniel was questioned. Not as his lawyer, I couldn't represent him, but as his sister. Detective Raymond approached me one morning with a folder in his hand, his expression unreadable. "We have new information," he said. My stomach tightened. "What kind?" He handed me a report. Forensics recreated the angle of the fall based on the bone fractures. I scanned the page, then my breath caught. "It doesn't match a push from the front," Raymond said softly. "It matches a rotational fall, someone losing balance, turning and striking their head without external force." My eyes widened. "You're saying?" "I'm saying the second fall, the one that killed him, may not have been caused by Daniel." My pulse hammered. Hope, fear, confusion, everything tangled together. "And there's more," he said. "We found healed fractures on your uncle's ribs, several, all consistent with physical abuse predating the night he died." I stared at him. "Abuse?" I whispered. He nodded. "Years' worth." My mind raced. "My mother never mentioned." "She wouldn't have," he cut gently. "Victims rarely do." My chest tightened painfully. Was my uncle not just an aggressor, but also a victim of something darker long before that night? Raymond continued. "There's another forensic detail, the blood patterns in your living room. You analyzed them after 40 years?" I asked, stunned. "Technology is better now, much better, and guess what? The pattern suggests that your mother was injured that night." I stiffened. "What kind of injury?" "Impact to the jaw, possibly from a strike. The old photos support it. Her face looks slightly swollen on the right side." My breath shook. All those years, all those nights, all those memories that made no sense, suddenly made perfect, horrifying sense. My mother was being hurt and she hid it for us, from us. Raymond sighed. "This wasn't murder, Evelyn. This was a violent household spiraling into tragedy. The story isn't what you think, and I suspect your mother only told part of it on the tape." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Because the injuries found on your uncle's skull were inconsistent with Daniel's strength at 15. My heart thumped. "Then who?" Raymond held up a hand. "We're not jumping to conclusions yet, but we're close." "Close to what?" "Close to unraveling who delivered the fatal blow. Close to uncovering a truth my mother shielded even in confession. Or close to tearing apart the last image of her I had left." 2 weeks later, we were back in court for the preliminary hearing. Reporters filled every seat. Cameras flashed when Daniel walked in. He sat straighter this time, calmer. Not because he was unafraid, but because he wasn't hiding anymore. The prosecutor called a forensic analyst to the stand. His testimony changed everything. He explained the head trauma, the angles, the rotation, the fractures inconsistent with a shove, the pre-existing abuse injuries, the defensive wounds on my mother from decades past. Then he dropped the bombshell. Based on the evidence, the fatal blow was not delivered by a 15-year-old child. It required strength and angle inconsistent with Daniel's size at the time. The courtroom erupted, cameras snapped, reporters whispered, the judge demanded silence. The prosecutor looked stunned, Daniel looked confused. I felt like the floor dropped away under me. The analyst continued. "Furthermore, the bruising pattern on the mother's arms, visible in several photographs recovered from the attic, suggests she was engaged in a physical struggle the night of the incident." My mouth went dry. "Are you saying the mother?" the prosecutor began. "I am saying," the analyst replied calmly, "that it is highly probable the mother caused the final fall, not the son." Daniel's attorney rose instantly. "Your Honor, we move to dismiss charges due to lack of probable cause and newly uncovered evidence indicating the defendant did not commit the alleged crimes beyond the cover-up, which occurred under coercion and childhood trauma." The judge leaned back, absorbing the shock. The prosecutor looked rattled, but she wasn't reckless. She knew when a case was evaporating in her hands. "Your Honor," she said reluctantly, "the state acknowledges the need to reevaluate." The judge nodded. "Motion to dismiss criminal charges related to homicide is granted. Obstruction charges will be evaluated separately." Gasps filled the courtroom. Daniel covered his face and cried, not sobbed, not broke down, just cried. Quietly, relieved, ruined, free all at once. When the room emptied, I walked to him. He stood shakily and wrapped his arms around me. He whispered into my shoulder, "It wasn't me." I held him tighter. "No," I whispered. "It wasn't, but Mom said, Mom told the version that protected you," I said softly, just like she always did. He pulled back, eyes red. "So what happens now?" I swallowed hard. "Now," I said, "we face the truth. The real one, not the one she carried alone." Daniel stared at me, fear and relief mixing in his eyes. "The real truth," he whispered. "About her, about him, about all of us." I nodded slowly. Because deep down, I knew we weren't at the end. We were only at the beginning.